Good morning, everyone. Our lesson for today is about a new poem entitled Schoolboy's Apology. So this poem comes from Vietnam and it talks about the experiences of the children, specifically of the schoolboy during the Vietnam War. So let us see how in some ways we can relate to the experience of the schoolboy in the poem Schoolboy's Apology. Now let us begin with the two pictures. Have you experienced the same thing? Have you also slept inside your classes or during the lecture of your teachers? Probably, right? So we have our own experiences or reasons rather why sometimes we lose our focus inside the classroom or inside our classes. And in the poem Schoolboy's Apology, let us also see the reason behind the actions or the attitude of the schoolboy during the lecture or during the class. So let us begin with the first stanza of the poem, and I subtitled it as setting because it describes where the story happens or where the story in the poem happens and of course what's happening. So let me read it for you. If sometimes I fall asleep in a lecture or shout and scream as if alone, please forgive me. Please don't be angry, for I have no place to play. So let us describe the setting first. As we can see, the story in the poem happens inside the classroom while the teacher is having her lecture. So let us now answer the question below. It says there, what is the poem or what is the persona in the poem apologizing for? Is it a proper act? So as we can see, the student is apologizing for her behavior inside the classroom or for his behavior inside the classroom because he has a tendency to fall asleep or even shout and scream inside the class. And if we are to think about it, it is not a proper act, right? It is not proper to sleep and shout or scream while the teacher is having a lecture. However, having known the background of this poem, wherein this poem is contextualized in the experiences of the children during the Vietnam War, then somehow we can rethink of it as, or maybe we can consider his experiences during the war for us to understand why the schoolboy or the persona in the poem acts the way he does. Alright, for example, let us take a look at these lines. So, the last two lines, it says there, please forgive me, please don't be angry. So, he's saying or he's telling his teacher to not be angry for his behavior inside the classroom. Why? Because he said, for I have no place to play. So how does this line help us to understand the behavior of the child? So let us go back to the first two stanzas. So his tendency inside the classroom is to fall asleep. So in that way, we can interpret it as if since he has no place to play, because the supposed playground becomes an arena for battle or for the war, right? It becomes an arena for war. Then it is only in his dream that he can enjoy his childhood. It is only in his dream that he can play, that he can enjoy his life together with his childhood friends or together with his siblings. Or maybe we can interpret it in some other way. Like the reason why he acts that way, because he has no place to play, and that left a lot of negative impact, especially on the psychological aspect of the child, that every time he remembers what he had experienced during the war, he would shout and scream. Okay, so that is his way of expressing what he feels. All right, I hope this stanza is clear with you. Now let us go to our next stanza, hopes and dreams. So the question that we are to answer on this part is, what does the stanza tell about the persona? Let me read it for you. I'm growing up, I want to be a sailor. I'm wishing for a giant arena, a stream, and I feel like yelling my life is beginning. Every minute I want to hold tight to my dreams. So to answer the question, the stanza tells us that no matter how difficult the situation is in Vietnam, despite the war, our persona still has a dream and he has a hope that he will be able to fulfill his dream and that is the dream of becoming a sailor. He wants to experience a better life, a life that is free. Now, let us focus at the last line in our second stanza. Every minute I want to hold tight to his dreams. What does it tell us? First, it tells us that he has a hope. He hopes that someday he will be able to fulfill his dream. Also, it tells us how challenging or how difficult the situation is in Vietnam because he has to hold tight to his dreams every minute. Meaning, there is a tendency to not be able to reach it because of their situation in Vietnam. Because he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know when and where they will be attacked. So that's how difficult the situation is. Now let's go to the next stanza. So this stanza will somehow tell us or introduce to us the historical background of the poem. Let me read it for you. But the fires of war have shriveled my joys. At every step, I see guns turned on me. At every word, I hear the crash of steel. Not believing, not understanding, I only stare. The slaughter goes on and on. Blood and bones and hatred all strained red. So let us now answer the question. What does the use of the word but at the start of the stanza 3 suggest? So we can relate it to the second stanza because in the second stanza, he has a dream. But the fires of war have shriveled his joys. Meaning, in achieving his dream, there are a lot of things that hinder him. Or there are a lot of things that hinder him in achieving his dream. Right? Because he can see what's happening in his surrounding. There are a lot of people being killed. Okay? And he can see that the fires of war, he says, the fires of war have shriveled my joys. So because of what's happening in their country, somehow, he loses his hope and his joy that he will someday be able to reach for his dreams. Okay? So, that is the meaning of the word, or that is what is being suggested by the word but. The hindrances in achieving his dreams of becoming a sailor. And that is maybe true not only to the persona, but to all the children who experienced the war. Okay? So, what does this stanza tell us about the persona? So, it tells us the experiences of the persona, the things that he saw during the war, and somehow, the losing of his joy and the losing of his hope because of the war situation in their country. Now, let us analyze it one by one. So, we are done with this part. And at every step, I see guns turned on me. So, imagine that, class. Imagine how difficult it is and how traumatic it is in the eyes of a child to see guns. Okay? And at every word, I hear the crash of steel. So, class, these two lines are examples of images. The first line is an imagery that appeal to our senses, so we can imagine how cruel the situation is. And the second stanza appeal to our sense of hearing. At every word, I hear the crash of steel. So you can hear the banging of the steel and of other things because of the war, right? And as you can see, at every or is repeated, right? It's repeated twice. So this is an example of repetition, specifically or of a sound device known as anaphora. Okay? Now, let us go to the next stanza or to the next line. Not believing, not understanding, I only stare. So aside from the repetition of the word not, we can see or we can imagine how innocent the children are. Diba? That they do not understand, but they have to endure it. Okay? So let us take a look at the two pictures at the background. We can see that the children on the right side, they can enjoy their childhood, right? They ran, they are in the playground. And it's very different from the children on the left. What's common among the two sets of children? They are both running. They are both running, right? But what's the difference? These children, they run because they are playing. They run because they enjoy playing with their siblings or with their childhood friends. On the other hand, these children on the left, they are running after their life. So in the first stanza, the persona said that he has no place to play. And that is correct. Because the place that's supposed to be their playground becomes a place of war. Right? So that is very sad. Now, it says here that the slaughter goes on and on. So meaning, and bones, blood and bones and hatred all strained red. So we can imagine how many dead bodies these children can see during their childhood. And that is very traumatic, right? So this one is another image or example of imagery. Blood and bones and hatred all stained red. So the use of the word red is very purposive because we can relate it with blood, right? That a lot of lives are sacrificed because of the war. Okay? So historically, so this is a background about the experiences of the children during the war. During the war years, life for children was very hard in both the north and the south of Vietnam. Houses and schools were bombed and destroyed. Many children became homeless and their schools had to be moved around or lessons had to take place after dark to avoid being targeted by heavy bombings. For example, one school in a liberated area in the south had to move site 3 times in 4 months due to the American air raids. Wherever they stopped, teachers and pupils built bamboo and palm leaf cottages during forests as their school. So we can imagine how difficult it is for the children to continue studying at the middle of the war. And somehow, or sadly, we can relate to this because now we may not be seeing guns all over places, but we are also battling against the effect of the pandemic. And the pandemic has also affected the educational system in our country, particularly you, our students. But then again, we are still blessed, right? Because we have the capacity to protect ourselves. If we are to adhere to the protocols of the government about social distancing, wearing face masks, and not going out if, let's say, it's not really important, then we can somehow protect ourselves as well as our family. But then again, these children, their experience was very uncertain because, as I mentioned earlier, they do not know when and where they will be attacked. That even their homes is not a safe place for them because they may be still subject to bombing, even if they are at home or they are in school, right? And take a look at the experience of these children. It says there, they had to, where is it? They had to move 3 times in 4 months. I understand that online classes is very challenging, right? Sometimes we are bombarded by a lot of activities, but then again, there's no need for us to transfer from time to time just to protect ourselves. We can still study at home, right? So I hope that we will continue, or we will keep the light, or we will keep our hope that someday we will still be able to reach our dreams no matter how difficult our situation is, our situation now, right? Okay, so I hope that you understand, that you understand the third stanza. Now let us go to our last stanza, and I subtitled it as The War. Let me read it for you. People running from the front to look out for themselves, cheating, lying, stabbing others in the back. Some of my friends have fallen. No one knew, no one cared. They were dewdrops, that's all. My home will be burned to the ground, the way back off, partitioned. So let us analyze a war stanza. So it says here, people running from the front to look out for themselves, cheating, lying, stabbing others in the back. If we are to think about it, why do they have to reach that point that they have to cheat, to lie, or to stab others in the back, meaning they have to betray others? It only tells us how desperate the situation is, that they need to prioritize their own safety, right? I can imagine the scenario of what happened in Afghanistan, the recent news about Afghanistan. Okay? And it says here, some of my friends have fallen. It tells us that some of his friends, some of the close people to him have died because of the war. No one knew, no one cared, they were dewdrops at all. So there's a repetition of the word or of the phrase no one to emphasize the point that what's happening to their fellow or to their friends, I mean, they do not know already what's happening to their fellow or to their friends. They don't know if they already died. They don't know if they were able to escape. And it says here, they were dewdrops, that's all. So dewdrops here, class, is an example of a symbol. But what does it symbolize? It symbolizes the lives of the people during the war, that they are like dewdrops, they easily fade. And that's how sad it is. And sometimes, from the lines number 3 and lines number 4, we can somehow relate to it, right? That even though now, during our time, we are not really experiencing a literal war, just like what I've mentioned earlier, but we have seen a lot of our friends, a lot of our fellow have fallen as well because of the effect of the pandemic. We can see a lot of our friends changing their profile picture into black or into a candle, and it's really sad that we can relate to the poem because of what we are experiencing. And the lives of the people are like dewdrops because we do not know when the pandemic or when the COVID-19 will attack us, and we do not know what will happen to our life once we get the virus. Okay, and let's go to the last two lines. My home will be burned to the ground, the way back of partitioned. So as you can see, this part or this line is an example of this explains what will happen in his home, in his own home, in the persona's home. But this is an example of ellipsis. So it's like a cliffhanger, and the author has a lot of reason why he uses an ellipsis. Sometimes it asks the readers to think of what will happen to the story, particularly, let's say, in the poem. So we do not know what happened next. All we can do is to think of the possible outcome of the war. Okay? So that's it. Okay, let me add this one, the psychological effect on the children. So it says here, let me just highlight this part. Severe losses and disruptions in their lives led to high rates of depression and anxiety in war-affected children. And this will somehow explain to us as well the behavior of the child or of the persona at the beginning of our poem. So let's say if you were a teacher and you are to handle a very diverse classroom, it's really important that you know the background experiences of your students for you to understand why they act that way. You have to get to know them more or better. Let me share this with you. In the first school where I taught, during PTC, I know you are familiar with PTC or the Parent-Teacher Conference. We do it one-on-one. So, one at a time, because our goal is to really understand our students. Okay? So that's it. So for the valuing part, I want you to think of the answers to these questions and write your answer or comment your answer in the comment section of our Google Classroom. First, with the persona situation in class, many Filipino classmates might laugh at this boy or bully him. How would you react in the situation? If you were a foreign teacher in Vietnam, knowing there was war in the country, what preparation would you do before facing your students? So I will wait for your answers in the comment section of our Google Classroom. But before we leave or before we end this lecture, I want to leave you this quotation: what is delayed is not lost. We have a lot of dreams, just like the persona in our poem. We know that at some point, his dreams might be delayed because of the war situation in their country. Maybe he still has to leave his country and continue his life in some other places. But it doesn't mean that his dreams are lost, because as long as he lives, as long as he continues to have his hope, then he will be able to reach for his dreams. Same with us. Now, we are always challenged by our situation. Maybe there are a lot of things that we want to do, but we cannot because we are restrained, we are limited by the pandemic. But it doesn't mean that whatever we want or that the dreams that we have are already lost. Because for as long as we live, we have the time and we have the capacity to fulfill all our dreams. Okay? So I hope that you continue to work for your dreams. Never lose the hope. Good morning, everyone, and have a nice day.